The Zelanti Republic was bleeding to death, one colony at a time. Chancellor Morvac stood in the war room of the Capitol building, his four amber eyes fixed on the massive holographic display that showed their shrinking territory. Red markers indicated fallen worlds. Yellow ones marked colonies under siege. The green markers representing safe Zelanti space grew fewer each day. The latest casualty was brutal. Nexus 7 had been a mining world with over 3 million civilians. The Korthax Empire had swept in with their distinctive black warships, shaped like jagged obsidian knives cutting through space. Their purple-skinned warriors were efficient in their cruelty. They didn't just conquer worlds, they harvested them like crops. "Sir, we've lost contact with Nexus 7, reported Communications Officer Tilvan, his normally bright blue skin now pale as Arctic ice. His six-fingered hands trembled as he manipulated the holographic controls. The last transmission was screaming. Then nothing. Morvac's throat sacs inflated and deflated in the Zelanti equivalent of a heavy sigh. Through the massive windows of the command center, he could see the orbital defense platforms that surrounded their homeworld. Sleek, curved structures that resembled metallic flowers in bloom. Beautiful, but ultimately useless against the Korthax war machine. The enemy didn't just kill defenders, they turned worlds into slaves. Entire populations were shipped off in massive prison barges to work in the Empire's industrial complexes. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones spent decades in the mining pits of dead worlds, extracting resources to fuel the next wave of conquest. "What about our fleet?" Morvac asked, though he already knew the answer. Defense Minister Corvin shuffled forward on his 8 legs, his insectoid features grim. "Admiral Thex took our remaining ships to try to evacuate Sector 12. We haven't heard from him in 6 days. Our long-range sensors detected multiple explosions in that region." The silence stretched like a funeral shroud. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. Their entire military, what little remained of it, was gone. The Zelanti had evolved on a peaceful world with gentle rains and singing forests. They were explorers, scientists, artists. They had built their civilization on cooperation and shared knowledge. War was alien to their nature. The Korthax, on the other hand, had crawled out of volcanic hellscapes where only the strong survived. Their entire culture was built around domination. They bred war like other species bred flowers. "Sir," Tilvan's voice cracked. "Long-range sensors show a Korthax battle fleet approaching the outer system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Morvac turned to look at the object that had consumed his thoughts for weeks. In the center of the war room sat a crystal case containing the ancient beacon. It was roughly the size of a Zelanti torso, made from some unknown black metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, not carved, but grown into the metal like living things. The archaeological team had found it deep in the ruins of Sector 9, buried under layers of debris from a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. Dr. Selvek, the expedition leader, had been excited beyond measure. The beacon was older than any known technology in the galaxy. Its power source was completely unknown, and its signal frequencies didn't match anything in their databases. "The beacon operates on quantum entanglement principles we don't understand," Dr. Selvek had explained during his briefing. "The frequency signature suggests it can broadcast across the entire galaxy instantaneously. Perhaps beyond. But sir, we have no idea who built it or who might be listening." Now, facing extinction, that mysterious beacon represented their only hope. "Show me the star charts," Morvac commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing the galaxy's spiral arms. A pulsing red line indicated the beacon's transmission vector. It pointed toward a region at the galaxy's edge that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The area was marked in ancient Galactic Council records as Quarantine Zone, Extreme Hazard, Do Not Approach. "Sir," Tilvan whispered, "that's the Forbidden Sector. The old records say something terrible lives there. Something so dangerous that the first galactic civilizations built warning beacons around it." Morvac's claws clicked against the smooth floor as he paced. Through the windows, he could see civilian transport ships fleeing the planet. Families clutching their few possessions, children crying, elderly Zelanti looking back at their homes one last time. Soon, if they were lucky, they would all be dead. If they were unlucky, they would wish they were. "What choice do we have?" Morvac asked the room. "In 3 days, the Korthax will be here. Our fleet is gone. Our defenses won't hold for more than a few hours. We can die with dignity, or we can take a chance that something out there might help us." Dr. Selvek stepped forward, her scales shifting to nervous patterns. "Chancellor, the quantum resonance could attract anything. We might be calling something worse than the Korthax. Worse than extinction. Morvak's voice carried the weight of his dying species. Worse than watching our children dragged away in chains. The room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of evacuation ships launching from the planet's surface. Morvak walked to the beacon and placed his hand on the activation panel. The device hummed to life, its strange symbols beginning to glow with an eerie blue light. "Activate it," Morvak commanded. "But sir, we don't know who, or what, might respond." "We're dead either way. Send the distress call." The beacon pulsed with energy that seemed to bend space around it. Reality warped and twisted as the device broadcast its ancient signal into the void, reaching toward that forbidden region where something had been waiting in the darkness for eons. 3 weeks after the ancient beacon's desperate cry echoed across the galaxy, reality itself seemed to tear apart at the edge of the Zelanti system. Space twisted and folded like paper being crumpled by invisible hands. Then, with a flash of brilliant blue light, massive ships materialized from hyperspace. The vessels that emerged were unlike anything in galactic records. Where most civilizations built sleek, curved starships that flowed like water through space, these newcomers had constructed angular monsters of metal and ceramic armor. They looked less like spaceships and more like flying fortresses built to ram through asteroid fields without slowing down. Captain Lisa Thompson stood on the bridge of the TCS Retribution, the flagship's command center humming with activity around her. Through the massive viewscreen, she could see the Korthax invasion fleet holding position near the Zelanti homeworld. Their ships were impressive in their own way, black as obsidian, shaped like predatory insects ready to strike. "Captain, I'm reading 4 to 7 Korthax vessels," reported sensor operator Kate Wilson, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. 12 dreadnoughts, 23 cruisers, and various support craft. "They've got the planet completely surrounded." Thompson nodded grimly. The Zelanti distress signal had reached Earth through an ancient communication network that humanity had been monitoring for decades. The message had been desperate, a dying civilization crying out for help against an empire that treated conquest like a hobby. "Those are some ugly-looking vessels," muttered Lieutenant James Rodriguez, examining the tactical readouts of the Korthax dreadnoughts. His expertise in alien ship design made him valuable for situations exactly like this. "But nothing we can't handle. Look at their armor plating, it's designed more for show than protection. And those weapons, they're energy-based, probably meant to terrorize civilian populations rather than fight a real war." Thompson studied the enemy formation. The Korthax had arranged themselves in a classic intimidation pattern, with their largest ships prominently displayed and their weapons powered up for maximum sensor visibility. It was psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale before the first shot was fired. "Admiral Richards wants to try diplomacy first," Thompson said, though everyone on the bridge knew how that would likely end. Humanity had dealt with aggressive empires before. They rarely listened to reason. "Open a channel to both fleets." Communications Officer Dale Parker worked his console with practiced efficiency. "Channel open to all ships in the system, Captain. Full spectrum broadcast." The response came immediately from the Korthax flagship. The view screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made most humans instinctively reach for weapons. General Vorthak of the Korthax Empire stood 7 feet tall, his purple-scaled hide covered in ritual scars that marked his victories in personal combat. His 4 arms ended in claws designed for ripping, and his elongated skull held rows of needle-sharp teeth. "I am General Vorthak of the Korthax Empire," he said, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. "You will identify yourselves immediately and surrender, or you will be destroyed along with these pathetic Zelanti." Before Thompson could respond, Admiral Michael Richards' voice came through the fleet communication system. The Admiral was aboard the TCS Vindication, positioned at the center of the human formation. His calm, measured tone contrasted sharply with Vorthak's aggressive posturing. "This is Admiral Michael Richards of the Terran Colonial Fleet. We received a distress signal from the Zelanti Republic requesting aid against an unlawful invasion. You will cease all hostile actions against the Zelanti people and withdraw your forces from this system immediately." Vorthak's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. His species had evolved as apex predators, and the concept of backing down from a fight was literally alien to their nature. "You dare threaten the mighty Korthax Empire? We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have enslaved 100 species. Your little fleet of, what are you, 12 ships? Will make fine additions to our victory monuments." Thompson counted the human vessels on her tactical display. Vorthak wasn't wrong about the numbers, the Terran colonial fleet had only brought a dozen ships to this engagement. But what the Korthax general didn't understand was that human ships were built according to the harsh realities of Earth's solar system, where cosmic storms could shred conventional vessels and asteroid impacts were considered minor inconveniences. The TCS Retribution alone carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. Its sister ships weren't much smaller. Each vessel in the human fleet represented decades of technological advancement driven by the simple necessity of surviving in one of the galaxy's most hostile star systems. "Admiral," Thompson said quietly into her command headset, "the Korthax fleet is moving to flanking positions. They are preparing to demonstrate their superiority by executing Zelanti prisoners." Through the communication channel, they could all hear Vorthak giving orders to his subordinates in the harsh, guttural language of his species. The translation software identified words like example, terror, and screaming. Admiral Richards' response came back calm and steady, but everyone who knew him could hear the ice forming in his voice. "We've liberated a few worlds ourselves, General. This is your only warning. Stand down your forces and prepare to discuss terms for your withdrawal, or we will remove you from this system." The silence that followed stretched like a loaded spring. Vorthak's 4 eyes narrowed as he processed what he had just heard. In his experience, lesser species begged for mercy or tried to bargain. They didn't issue ultimatums to the Korthax Empire. "You think your 12 ships can defeat the might of 4 to 7 Korthax warships?" Vorthak's voice rose to a roar. "I will enjoy mounting your skulls on my command throne." The communication channel closed with an aggressive click. Thompson looked at the tactical display showing the two fleets facing each other across the void. The Korthax ships bristled with weapons and moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered real resistance. The human vessels hung in space like patient hunters, their armor plating scarred from encounters with cosmic phenomena that would destroy most civilian spacecraft. "All stations, battle stations," Thompson announced. "Looks like diplomacy just failed." The neutral meeting took place aboard Harmony Station, one of the few remaining Zelanti diplomatic outposts still functioning in the outer system. The station itself was a work of art, crystalline spires and flowing curves that caught starlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns across its hull. It had been designed for peaceful negotiations between civilized species, not for hosting what was about to become the galaxy's most dangerous diplomatic failure. General Vorthak strutted through the station's corridors like he owned them. His crimson battle armor reflected the soft lighting, each piece inscribed with the names of worlds he had conquered. The armor wasn't just protective, it was a walking trophy case. Behind him marched 6 Korthax elite guards, their weapons powered down but ready. They moved with the predatory grace of creatures born to hunt. The meeting room was circular, designed according to Zelanti principles of harmony and equality. No head table, no position of dominance. Just a simple round surface surrounded by chairs adapted for different species. Soft music played in the background, the sound of distant ocean waves mixed with alien bird songs. Admiral Michael Richards was already seated when Vorthak entered. He looked almost disappointingly ordinary to the Korthax general's eyes. Average height, graying hair, wearing a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations. No battle scars, no intimidating weapons, no signs of the warrior culture that Vorthak respected. Flanking Richards were 2 other humans. Colonel Rebecca Foster sat to his right, her auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her uniform was crisp, professional, and revealed nothing about the combat experience that had earned her a place on the Admiral's staff. Major Robert Clark occupied the left position, his dark eyes constantly scanning the room with the alertness of a career soldier. To Vorthak, they looked like bureaucrats playing at being warriors. "Your species is unknown to us," Vorthak began, settling his massive frame into the reinforced chair that had been brought specifically for his use. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been denied anything. "The Galactic Council has no records of your civilization. This suggests you are either very young or very primitive." Richards didn't react to the insult. He simply folded his hands and waited for Vorthak to continue. However, the Korthax general said magnanimously, "The Empire is generous to those who serve faithfully. Submit to Korthax rule and we will grant you the honor of joining our forces. Your species shows promise, you built ships capable of reaching this system, which means you have some small talent for engineering." "That's very generous of you," Richards replied in a tone that gave nothing away. "And what would this service entail, exactly?" Vorthak's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He had expected more resistance from these strange beings. Perhaps they were smarter than he had initially thought. "Your warriors will fight in our armies," he explained, gesturing with one clawed hand. They will learn true combat from Korthax veterans and earn glory in battle. Your females will bear strong children to replenish our forces. Hybrid offspring often show interesting capabilities. Your worlds will contribute resources to feed our continued expansion across the galaxy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Colonel Foster's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her expression remained professional. Major Clark's hand moved slightly closer to his sidearm before stopping. Only Richards appeared unchanged, though something cold flickered behind his eyes. "I see," Richard said quietly. "And if we refuse this generous offer?" Vorthak's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "Then you will join the Zelanti in chains, of course. The Empire has no use for species too stupid to recognize opportunity when it is presented to them." He gestured dismissively toward the station's viewports, where the lights of the besieged Zelanti homeworld were visible in the distance. "Look at them, a people so weak they called for help from strangers rather than fight their own battles. They will make adequate slaves once we break their spirits completely." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Somewhere in the station's depths, life support systems hummed quietly. The gentle music continued playing, now seeming grotesquely inappropriate for the conversation taking place. "Perhaps I should demonstrate what happens to those who resist the Korthax Empire," Vorthak said with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. He activated a communication device on his wrist. "Bring them in." The meeting room doors hissed open. 4 Korthax guards entered, dragging 3 Zelanti civilians between them. The prisoners were clearly non-combatants, an elderly Zelanti with scholarly robes, a younger female with the markings of an artist, and a small child who couldn't have been more than 10 years old by human standards. All 3 showed signs of rough treatment. The scholar's robes were torn, the artist had a cut across her forehead that leaked blue blood, and the child clung to her with wide, terrified eyes. "These specimens were captured during our liberation of Mining Colony 7, Vorthak explained matter-of-factly. "They refused to cooperate with our initial processing procedures. I find that public executions often help convince other species to be more reasonable." Colonel Foster's chair creaked as her grip tightened on the armrests. Major Clark had gone perfectly still, which anyone familiar with human body language would recognize as a very dangerous sign. Richard stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that seemed to press against everyone in the room. "I see. Well, General, you've just made this very simple." The Admiral turned to look directly at Vorthak, and for the first time, the Korthax General saw something in those human eyes that he had never encountered before. It wasn't fear, wasn't anger, wasn't even hatred. It was something far more dangerous, the calm, cold certainty of someone who had already decided that the creature in front of him needed to die. "You're going to release those prisoners," Richards continued in that same quiet tone. "You're going to withdraw your forces from this system. And you're going to pray to whatever gods your species believes in that we're feeling merciful today." Vorthak's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. Then he threw back his head and roared with laughter that echoed off the crystalline walls. "You threaten me? In my moment of victory?" He stood to his full height, towering over the humans. "I think these Zelanti will die slowly, as an example of what happens when lesser species show disrespect to their betters." The last thing Vorthak saw before everything went wrong was Admiral Richards' slight, cold smile. The moment Admiral Richards gave the order, 12 human warships transformed from patient hunters into instruments of controlled destruction. The Korthax Empire was about to learn a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations. There was a reason Earth had been marked as a quarantine zone. Captain Lisa Thompson felt the deck plates of the TCS Retribution vibrate as the ship's massive engines came online. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had drilled for this moment countless times. But what the Korthax didn't understand was that for humans, this wasn't just a drill, this was Tuesday. "All stations report ready for combat," announced Lieutenant Paul Davis from the weapons console. His fingers moved across holographic displays that showed targeting solutions for 47 enemy vessels. "Railgun batteries are charged and locked on primary targets." Through the main viewscreen, Thompson watched the Korthax fleet begin their attack formation. Their ships moved with predatory grace, black hulls gleaming like polished obsidian. Each vessel was a work of art designed to terrorize civilized species. Elegant curves, flowing lines, and weapons that glowed with menacing energy. They looked impressive. They looked deadly. They looked absolutely nothing like the brutal, angular fortresses that humanity had built to survive in Earth's solar system. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups from the Korthax dreadnoughts," reported sensor operator Kate Wilson. They're charging their primary weapons. Looks like some kind of plasma cannon system. Thompson nodded grimly. The Korthax had evolved on a world with 3 suns and gentle gravity. Their technology reflected their environment, elegant, efficient, and completely unprepared for the reality of Deathworld engineering. Human ships, on the other hand, had been forged in the fires of Sol's asteroid belt. Every plate of armor had been tested against cosmic radiation that could cook a person in seconds. Every weapon system had been designed to crack kilometer-wide chunks of ice and metal. Every shield generator had been built to deflect solar flares that could sterilize entire planets. The Korthax were about to discover what happened when Gardenworld engineering met Deathworld necessity. "Sir, the enemy flagship is hailing us," Communications Officer Dale Parker reported. "General Vorthak wants to speak with Admiral Richards." "Put him through," Thompson ordered. The view screen flickered, showing Vorthak's snarling face. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically at alien control panels. "You have made a grave mistake, humans. We offered you mercy, and you threw it away. Now you will learn why the Korthax Empire rules 1,000 worlds." Admiral Richards' voice came through the fleet communication system, calm as always. "General, you're about to learn why Earth was quarantined. Last chance, surrender now and we'll let you live." Vorthak's laugh was like breaking glass. "Surrender? To 12 ships against 47? Your species is even more primitive than I thought." The communication cut off. Around the human fleet, space began to fill with deadly energy as the Korthax opened fire. Plasma bolts that could vaporize city blocks struck the TCS Retribution's armor plating and dispersed harmlessly. The ship had been built to mine asteroids in the heart of solar storms. Korthax weapons, designed to intimidate civilized species, barely scratched the surface. "Their shields are impressive," Davis reported, studying the sensor readings. "But they are optimized for energy weapons. Classic mistake." Thompson smiled grimly. The Korthax had built their defenses around the assumption that all spacefaring species would use clean, efficient energy weapons. It was a logical assumption if you had evolved in a civilized part of the galaxy where warfare was conducted according to established rules. But humans hadn't evolved in civilization. They had crawled out of a gravity well surrounded by flying rocks, radiation storms, and cosmic phenomena that made normal space travel impossible. "Target the flagship," Thompson ordered. "Show them what asteroid mining equipment can do to their pretty ships." "Railgun batteries locked on target," Davis reported. "Kinetic penetrators loaded and ready to fire." Fire. The TCS Retribution shuddered as magnetic coils accelerated tungsten rods to a significant percentage of light speed. The projectiles were simple chunks of metal, no more sophisticated than thrown rocks. But when a thrown rock was moving at relativistic speeds, sophistication became irrelevant. The kinetic rounds punched through Vorthak's shields like they weren't even there. Energy barriers designed to deflect plasma and lasers had no answer for solid matter moving at cosmic velocities. The tungsten penetrators struck the Korthax flagship's hull and kept going, carving through armor plating, deck after deck, until they emerged from the other side in showers of molten metal. Across the battlefield, 11 other human warships opened fire with weapons designed to break apart mountains. Particle beams that could tunnel through solid rock found Korthax armor laughably thin. Mining charges originally built to crack asteroids turned elegant alien warships into expanding clouds of debris. The Korthax fleet, which had conquered 1,000 worlds through intimidation and superior firepower, found themselves facing opponents who considered their most advanced weapons to be industrial equipment. "Captain, we're receiving multiple surrender signals," Parker reported, his voice tight with disbelief. 17 Korthax vessels are requesting immediate cessation of hostilities. Through the chaos of battle, General Vorthak's final transmission reached the human fleet. His voice was a horrified whisper, no longer carrying the arrogance of inevitable victory. "What kind of monsters are you? What kind of hellworld breeds creatures that fight wars with mining equipment?" Admiral Richards' response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every surviving Korthax would hear it. "The kind that doesn't like bullies, General. The kind that remembers every species you've enslaved and every world you've stripped bare." Within 3 hours, the mighty Korthax invasion fleet was either drifting wreckage or fleeing toward the edge of the system. Their elegant ships, built for psychological warfare against civilized opponents, had proven helpless against vessels designed to operate in environments that would kill most organic life. The quarantine around Earth hadn't been meant to keep humanity imprisoned. It had been meant to keep the galaxy safe from a species that considered cosmic disasters to be minor inconveniences and built their tools accordingly. Now that quarantine was broken, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Zelanti Prime, Chancellor Morvac stood on the observation deck of his restored Capitol building, watching the most remarkable reconstruction effort in galactic history unfold before his eyes. Where Korthak's bombardment had left twisted metal and shattered crystal, human engineering teams were rebuilding faster than seemed physically possible. A construction crew worked on the damaged spaceport below, and Morvac found himself fascinated by their casual disregard for what other species considered dangerous working conditions. The humans operated in near-vacuum environments without bulky protective suits, using equipment that generated radiation levels that would be lethal to most galactic citizens. Their robotic assistants moved with mechanical precision, lifting structural beams that would require entire teams of Zelanti workers. "Your people are intense," Morvac told Admiral Michael Richards, who had joined him on the observation deck. The Admiral looked surprisingly relaxed for someone whose species had just announced their presence to the galaxy by annihilating one of its most feared military forces. Richards smiled, following Morvac's gaze to where a human engineer was personally welding support struts while hanging upside down from a construction crane. "You should see us when we're actually trying. This was just a peacekeeping mission." The casual way he said it sent a chill through Morvac's four-chambered heart. A peacekeeping mission. The humans had destroyed the Korthak's invasion fleet like it was a routine police action, using what they apparently considered basic industrial equipment. "Admiral," Morvac said carefully, "your ships, those weapons weren't military-grade, were they? The railguns? No, those are standard asteroid mining tools. We just pointed them at different targets." Richards paused, watching a human construction mech lift a piece of debris that weighed several tons. "Our actual military vessels are back home, guarding the Sol system. What you saw was basically our equivalent of a Coast Guard patrol." The implications of that statement were staggering. The Zelanti had been rescued by what humanity considered a minor expeditionary force, using industrial equipment as weapons of war. Morvac tried to imagine what human military technology might actually be capable of and decided he didn't want to know. News of the human intervention had spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communication networks could carry it. The ancient beacon that had called for salvation had instead announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. For the first time in millennia, a major galactic empire had been decisively defeated by an unknown species. The response had been immediate and varied. Peaceful species like the Altarian Federation had sent diplomatic inquiries, hoping to establish trade relations with these powerful newcomers. Aggressive empires like the hegemony of Zex had quietly begun reinforcing their border defenses and reconsidering their expansion plans. But it was the discovery of Earth's quarantine records that had truly shaken the galactic community. Dr. Yenex, the galaxy's leading xenoarchaeologist, had presented his findings to the Galactic Council just 2 weeks ago. The presentation had been classified at the highest levels, but rumors were already spreading through diplomatic channels. The quarantine around the Sol system wasn't a prison. It was a warning. Ancient civilizations had encountered humanity before, millions of years ago, when the galaxy was younger and more violent. They had studied Earth from a distance, observing a species that thrived on a world that would kill most galactic life within hours. The early records spoke of creatures that hunted megapredators for sport, survived ice ages that lasted millennia, and built their first tools from the bones of creatures that could crush starships. The quarantine hadn't been meant to keep humanity imprisoned. It had been meant to keep the galaxy safe until it was mature enough to handle contact with a Deathworld species. Now that protection was gone, and the implications were rippling across civilized space. On the Korthak's homeworld of Vorthak Prime, the surviving members of the Empire's ruling council huddled in their fortress palaces, sending increasingly desperate warnings to anyone who would listen. General Thexan, one of the few Korthak's commanders to survive the battle, had become an involuntary expert on human capabilities. "They don't fight wars," he reported to a gathering of military leaders from across the galaxy. "They exterminate problems. Those ships that destroyed our fleet? They were construction vessels. Their crew quarters had civilian families aboard, children playing in recreation areas while their parents operated weapons that could crack planets." The message was spreading through both official and unofficial channels. The galaxy had new protectors, and they didn't negotiate with slavers, conquerors, or anyone who threatened peaceful species. The hegemony of Zex quietly released all political prisoners and announced a new policy of cultural preservation for their subject worlds. The Stellar Dominion suddenly discovered a passionate interest in infrastructure development rather than military expansion. Even the notorious pirate clans of the Outer Rim began avoiding systems that showed any signs of human presence. Meanwhile, human diplomatic vessels were making contact with dozens of species across the galaxy. Not military ships, actual diplomatic craft that looked like mobile cities, complete with scientific laboratories, cultural exchange centers, and what appeared to be entire university campuses built into their hulls. The humans were offering technology, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. But they were also making it very clear that certain behaviors would not be tolerated in their presence. Admiral Richards checked his communication device as reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The Terran colonial fleet was establishing permanent bases in 17 systems, all at the request of local governments who wanted protection from aggressive neighbors. Chancellor, Richard said, I have some good news. The Galactic Council has agreed to recognize Terran sovereignty and grant humanity full diplomatic status. We'll be opening embassies throughout civilized space. Morvac nodded, though part of him wondered if civilized space would have the same meaning now that humanity had arrived. The galaxy was changing, and species that had grown comfortable with conquest and oppression were about to learn that the universe was a much more dangerous place than they had imagined. The age of unchecked aggression was over. The humans were here, and they had made their position abundantly clear. They were the galaxy's new neighborhood watch, and they took the job very seriously. The E&D*.